Hi, my name's Shane, the owner of Paint Pals. Let's find out which caulking is the strongest. Alright, so that was actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to walk you through what my thought process was, what I did, and the adjustments and changes I had to make along the way, what I learned from running this test. I'm going to tell you about the winner and some other attributes about the one that did the best. And then I'm also going to tell you about some future tests that we're going to run on caulking. So the thought process was actually pretty simple. I just wanted to know, hey, what's the best caulking that we can use on our paint jobs? So I asked one of my painters to go around and collect all the best top of the line paints that we can get in our area. So just go to all the local paint stores and hardware stores and gather them up. And then I asked him to take like a typical siding board, typical trim board, butt them up next to each other, run a bead of caulk. And he did that with 9 different caulkings, and he did 2 boards for each caulking. So I had a board like this that I did the test on, and I still have these boards where it was more of an inside corner rather than butted up next to each other. So we actually did that back in February of 2024. So these had a solid 21 months to dry and cure before I actually did the testing. All right, so when I finally had time to get around and test these caulkings, I had to figure out, how am I gonna do this? So I rigged up some bolts, a few cables, drilled some holes, and got to work. But this actually went a lot different than I thought it was going to. And the reason for that is, for these boards, what we actually did is we butted them up next to each other, but to keep them together, we used one of these backer boards, and we had it like this, and we actually put a few screws in it to keep them together, and then ran the bead of caulk. When I removed this backer board, it felt really flimsy, like there was some wobble, like I could do this, and I was almost worried that I could just easily like tear it. So it just felt flimsy, and I didn't expect it to be as strong as it was. So let me just explain the type of caulking that we tested. There was 9 of them that we tested. 7 of those 9, if you look on the tube, it says lifetime warranty. There was actually 2 caulkings though that had a lower rating. This DAP Alex Plus that has a 40-year, and then this Sherwin-Williams one that has a 55-year. So just something to know about caulking is, from what I've seen, there's mainly 2 different types. There's siliconized or urethanized, and basically one's using silicone, one is using urethane. And what I've seen is that the ones that use urethane typically have a higher rating. In fact, the 7 of these lifetime warranties will say on the tube urethanized. I think there was 1 or 2 that didn't actually say, so I couldn't tell. But the 2 that had the ratings that weren't lifetime do say siliconized on the tube. So I decided when I was going to start with this one because it had the lowest rating of 40 years because I expected it to be the weakest and fail first. So I'm just going to show you the footage of what I was doing and how I was testing this and just walk you through the thought process. But I wanted to explain why I decided to start with this guy over the rest. All right, so I decided to start by hanging weights, and I started with the lowest weight I had, which was 2.5 pounds. And honestly, I thought maybe it would break here. So I kept incrementing up by 2.5 pounds the weight, and I would set a timer for 30 seconds and let it hang for 30 seconds. So I just kept going up in weight, and I kept being surprised. I didn't think it was going to get over 25 pounds, but as you'll see, it got way over 25 pounds, and it took the weight no problem. When I would let it hang, I would go up and I would look to see hey, is it stretching? Is it showing any signs of failure? And with this DAP, Alex Plus, the 40-year, I didn't see any stretching or any signs that it was going to fail. So you can see I just keep jumping up in weights, and then I finally got to a 45-pound weight and hung that, and again, to my astonishment, it held it no problem. And that's when I realized there is no way I'm going to be able to do this with 9 different Caulkings, and I have no idea how high this is going to go. And I'm just not strong enough to keep lifting up these heavy weights and hanging it on there. So I realized I needed to switch to a different system. So I decided to switch over to a ratchet. I also realized I should set up some different cameras to make sure that I could see the scale in the footage, and to get a close-up on the actual board so I could see if it was stretching or if it's just going to snap. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to pull on the ratchet, increase the tension in the weight until it's going to fail. And you can see I'm doing that here. And something I didn't realize when I was doing this is I would pull up on the ratchet and you could see the weight increases, but I would get to the end where I couldn't really pull up anymore. And then when I would go down on the ratchet, sometimes the weight would come down a little bit and then I would start pulling again. So it would like go up in weight, hit a point, come down, and then I would start pulling again, and then it would maybe fail later. Now, luckily, on 7 of the 9 caulks, it was always clean to where I would get to a higher number on that second pull before it broke. But the 2 that didn't happen on was the first one I did, the DAP Alex Plus. You can actually see right here that when I was first ratcheting it, I got all the way up to like 64 pounds. And again, I was just in disbelief, and I stopped there just to like look at it, and I was just really impressed. I didn't know I was right at the breaking point. And again, with this being my first one, I also realized something else. I was trying to turn it, you can see here, so that the camera could see it. But then I realized right here that I'm actually pulling on the scale above it, increasing the weight, which is not actually felt. So then I realized if I'm going to do that, I have to put my hand down below so that it actually is felt, that weight. And you can see here it just snapped because I was right at the breaking point, which I didn't realize with this first one. I had no idea where it would break at. So you can see it actually broke at like 61, but just before that it was holding above 61. It got all the way up to 64. So if anything, it wasn't fair to this one because it was my first one. You can also see it really surprised me when it broke. I wasn't expecting it, and that's when I decided, hey, I should put on some safety glasses. And now I had a better idea of what to do and what to expect with the other 8 ones that I tested. So I just wanted to walk you through, what my thinking was on testing this and how it all kind of came together. All right, so what did I learn from doing all this? I learned that some of them actually snapped, while others kind of stretched and then kind of tore. Something that's interesting with that as well is the ones that tended to snap, when I actually look at the boards, I can feel that the caulking is actually brittle and hard. It's not very flexible. Where on the ones that actually tore, I can, it's very flimsy still. It's very flexible. I can actually pull and stretch it. So it's still soft and has that elasticity. And I would assume that that's what you'd want in the caulking that you'd want to use. When a house or building shifts, I imagine it's going to shift very subtly and slowly, and you want that caulking to stretch. I don't think you want it to be brittle and to just snap or break. But I'm just pointing out that's something I noticed and learned from this experiment. So another cool thing we noticed is the caulk that we've actually been using for the last year is this guy right here. It's Shermax from Sherwin-Williams with the Lifetime. And the reason we use this is, Sherwin-Williams brand, it's got a good name, we trust them, and we just decided to go with this guy. But I believe that's why my painter got 2 from Sherwin-Williams. This is their next one down, that's 55 years, and this one is silicone, this one's urethanize. But what was nice to see is if you paid a little bit more for the better one, the more expensive one, that it did outperform the one that was less expensive. In fact, this guy almost held twice the amount of weight as this guy before breaking. It was nice to see that both of these though did stretch and didn't just snap. Another thing I learned and was surprised about is a lot of them performed really similar. If I ranked them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 based on how much weight they hold, 2 through 5 were all within 6.5 pounds of each other. And obviously this experiment isn't perfect, but with it being so close, I could almost chalk those up as just like a tie, which I guess isn't too surprising because they're all the top of the line Lifetime caulking, so I guess you'd expect them to act pretty similar. Another thing that was really surprising and I learned was caulking is actually a really good adhesive. Something that was surprising is that all of them broke in the middle. and all of them still have caulking on both sides of the wood, meaning that it didn't just like rip off the wood. All of them actually, the caulking is what failed and it broke, but they all stayed attached to the siding or the trim board, which again was just really surprising and shows like they do a really good job of like biting and holding on to the siding. Another thing I noticed is that some of the caulks did actually yellow over that 21-month period, while others stayed pretty white and true to the original color. So the definitive winner was this guy. It was the only one that got up and over 70 pounds. But obviously this test isn't perfect, and just how strong it is isn't everything when it comes to caulking. You know, usually when I'll ask my painters, hey, what do you think is the best caulk? They give me reasons why they like one caulk over the other based on the person applying it or the application. For example, they'll be like, hey, I like this one because it doesn't drip. Or when I smooth it out with my finger, you know, it smooths out really easily, it cleans up really easily, or it like dries really quickly, stuff like that. So there was some other really cool attributes with this caulking that I was surprised about. It's cool that not only, at least with this test, it was the strongest, but some other cool things is it actually says you can apply this in the rain while the surface is wet, where all the others said that you can't do that. Another thing I found surprising was you could apply this at a wide range of temperatures. It said anywhere from 0 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to 140, where a lot of the other ones say like once it gets too cold or below freezing, you can't apply it. Another cool thing is if you read the tubes, they'll all give a amount of time you have to wait before you can paint it. Anywhere from 30 minutes with this guy up to 6 hours with some of these others. But one thing that was cool with this guy, it was on the low end where it said you only have to wait an hour before applying paint. So that brings me to my final point. You know, I want to talk about some future testing we'll do with caulking. I still have these boards right here where it's kind of that inside corner with these 9 caulks. So if you guys have any ideas on what I should do and test with this, please put them in the comments. I'm not 100% sure how I want to test this just yet, but I do know one test I want to do and will do here soon is I want to just apply the caulk and then paint it right away. Because I've always wondered what happens if you don't wait that 6 hours or 30 minutes or whatever it is. From what I've read and researched, it seems like the issue you'll run into is you can put the paint on, but then the paint will actually dry quicker than the caulking. So then what can happen is the caulk will dry and shrink, which can cause the paint to wrinkle or even crack. But the integrity of the caulking is fine. The issue is this, just the aesthetic of the paint can get compromised or look bad. But I've always just kind of wondered like what would happen, because it does stink, you know, if we're on like a new build and, you know, another trade nicks something up or something, we gotta go do a touch up. Sometimes it's like, oh, we gotta caulk it and then paint it. So it's always kind of a bummer, you know, we have to caulk it, come back another day or leave for a few hours, come back and paint it. I've always wondered like, what if we just painted it? What would actually happen? So that's a test I'm definitely gonna run. And, you know, maybe I'll repeat this with some of the top performing caulks, because, you know, nothing really means much unless it's repeatable. And this isn't perfect. You know, each one of these boards is a little bit different. Maybe it was a little unfair. Some of them had a better board to adhere to. I asked my painter to do it as consistent as possible, but maybe he, you know, cut the tube a little bit bigger and applied more caulk in one versus the other. But I definitely want to run some other tests on caulking. And the whole reason and point of doing these things is just our never-ending pursuit to be the best that we can and to offer our customers the best value. So that's why we do this. And even if you're not going to be a Paint Pals client, I really hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, you can let me know by liking, commenting, or subscribing. Again, I'm Shane with Paint Pals. Thanks for watching. See you later.